Main event of the evening.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing the 7th episode of Season 2 of The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, There's No Place Like Rome.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in There's No Place Like Rome.
The time machine's temporal transducer is out of alignment. Mr. Cool gets stuck inside the engine, but Fonzie manages to get him out and fix the transducer with a tap of his toes. In the internal monitor, Fonzie notices he needs a haircut and decides Richie's going to help him out.
If I mess up your hair, you'll mess up my face.
Relax, Red.
After practicing on Ralph, of course, trying to help by raising the chair Ralph is getting his haircut in, Mr. Cool ends up hitting them with the ejection ray, transporting the two redheads to 57. Not 1957, 57 BC.
BC? That could mean big catastrophe for Richie and Ralph.
Outside the machine, General Maximus of the Roman Empire is boasting of his plan to capture the city being defended by King Gallus and his forces. Then, he'll force Princess Claudia to marry him and take over the kingdom.
Princess Claudia will be forced to marry me, and her father's kingdom will be mine.
The troops await your order, Maximus.
He orders his troops to storm the city, including new recruits, Richie and Ralph. Fonzie, Cupcake, and Mr. Cool land on a fortification, and immediately hear a woman calling for help, much to Cupcake's annoyance.
Help! Someone help me, please!
Hey, even better, we're within swashbuckling range of a damsel in distress.
I might have known.
Fonzie does not swing on a vine to rescue her, instead simply flinging himself between her and her pursuers, using a nearby lever. Luckily for him, the soldiers are just Richie and Ralph. They explain they were being ordered by General Maximus, who then sends his largest soldier to attack the gang. Cupcake's attempt to help only zaps up a massive banner and red carpet. Fonzie is able to use the carpet to subdue the soldier, though. And then Fonzie does his obligatory swing using the banner, which he wraps around Maximus, and then pushes him off the fortification. King Gallus suddenly appears and thanks Fonzie for saving his daughter Claudia. The entire gang are guests at a celebratory feast, where Cupcake stews in jealousy over pretty women serving Fonzie food. Ralph wants in too, but instead he gets a big hairy man.
Food for the hero.
General Maximus and his forces return with a battering ram, and begin chipping away at the walls of the city. Cupcake tries to help, but ends up turning it into a modern-day excavator. As Gallus readies his men to defend the city, the gang and Claudia flee underground. Cupcake manages to zap away the pursuing Maximus, only for him to reappear driving a subway train.
What's a subway train doing here?
Hey, let's not stick around to find out.
Cupcake, Richie, and Ralph are cornered at a dead end. Although hesitant to use her powers again, Ralph pushes her into it, and she zaps them above ground, about to be attacked by a lion. Fonzie, Mr. Cool, and Claudia are cornered by Maximus and his men in the catacombs, where they take Claudia hostage and drop Fonzie and Mr. Cool into a pool using a switch and trapdoor.
We'll see who has the last laugh, Maxi Taxi. And I sure hope it's us, pal.
They manage to swim to dry land and begin to get out of the catacombs. Meanwhile, Cupcake and Richie run from the lion, but Ralph unexpectedly helps him by pulling a thorn out of his paw.
You want me to pull the thorn out? Sorry, I don't make house calls.
Fonzie and Mr. Cool make their way through the sewers and back up above ground, where Maximus is taking Claudia back to Rome. Cupcake, Richie, and Ralph watch the procession of soldiers. Richie has a plan to save Claudia.
That's good.
It relies on Cupcake's powers.
That's bad.
She zaps Maximus out of his palanquin and up into a tree with herself and her friends. The branch breaks, and Maximus orders the barbarians caged. Once they reach Rome, they'll be fed to lions at the Colosseum.
Looks like old Maximus has grabbed everybody but us, Cool. We gotta get this rescue on a roll.
Right, Fonzie!
Fonzie and Mr. Cool hijack a chariot and follow. In Rome, Claudia reluctantly agrees to marry Maximus to save Cupcake, Richie, and Ralph. It doesn't actually save them, because they are taken to the Colosseum. A lion is released to devour the gang, only for Ralph to recognize him as the very same lion who he helped earlier. Assuming the best, he happily sticks his head into the lion's maw.
Rich, he's a pussycat. Make this look good, remember? You owe me one.
Only to realize that the lion he befriended is elsewhere in the Colosseum, and this one is hungry. Naturally, he runs. Fonzie and Mr. Cool arrive, and Fonzie subdues the vicious lion by throwing it back into his cell.
All right, you overgrown alley cat, now you're facing the barn.
He leaps up to the box where Maximus has Claudia, and swings away with her on a garland of flowers. They speed away on the chariot, with Maximus giving chase in his own vehicle through the streets of Rome. Fonzie leaps over the aqueduct, and when Maximus attempts to follow, he ends up falling out of his chariot into the water. He's fine though, unfortunately, landing in the pool at the end of the aqueduct, and Mr. Cool scrubs him down.
I guess you could say Maximus is all washed up.
Thank you, Peter. That was There's No Place Like Rome. It first aired back on October 31st, 1981. On this Halloween Saturday, the Fonz and the Happy Days gang was followed by a new Richie Rich Scooby-Doo show. This time around, Scooby and his friends attend an air show but get chased by an evil German baron in his warplane. Also, there's a parody of Jack and the Beanstalk called Scooby and the Beanstalk. CBS continued to air the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show, and NBC was ready with a new episode of The Smurfs. This week, Painter and Poet feel unappreciated and leave the Smurf village, but they are soon kidnapped by Gargamel.
Avoid Gargamel at all costs.
So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
Probably Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner. Thinking about the Smurfs again, do you ever think about how weird it is that there's really no consistent criteria for what your single quality will be as a Smurf? It can be a personality trait like Vanity Smurf, or I guess Brainy Smurf. It can be gender, like Smurfette. It can be your hobby/vocation, like Painter and Poet Smurf. Does that mean that none of the other Smurfs can ever take up painting or poetry because they already have Smurfs for that?
It does mean that. And in fact, I would be more worried if I were one of the Smurfs in the background who didn't get some gimmick or some occupation or personality trait. Like, who am I? Nothing Smurf? I'm background Smurf? That would be a terrible life.
Oh man, that sounds like hell.
There's No Place Like Rome was directed by Ray Patterson, George Gordon, and Rudy Zamora. It was written by Jeffrey Scott.
Great Scott!
Jeffrey is a prolific TV writer from Los Angeles who has specialized mainly in animated shows from the mid-1970s to the present day. His birth name is Jeffrey Maurer, and he's the brother of Michael Maurer, who wrote It's All Downhill From Here earlier this season. They're both the grandsons of Moe Howard of the Three Stooges.
Oh, so you want a piece of turkey?
Yeah, give it to me now.
Oh, you got it.
Jeffrey even made cameos in some later Stooge films like Kook's Tour, The Outlaws Is Coming, and The Three Stooges Go Around the World in a Daze. Jeffrey's writing credits include
Dynamite, Clue Club, Captain Caveman, Spider-Woman, Plastic Man, Super Friends, Sonic the Hedgehog, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, DuckTales, Dragon Tales, Tailspin, Goof Troop, and so many more.
But he's best known, however, as the creator of Muppet Babies.
Everybody knows the Muppets. They f***ing had babies. The babies got their own show.
What did you think of that? The grandson of Moe Howard is the creator of Muppet Babies.
That's a real everything is connected moment. And given how the Muppets as a franchise is very much a recursive meditation on show business and the history thereof, it's kind of perfect, really.
As for cultural and historical references this week, though it's now associated with The Wizard of Oz,
there's no place like home.
The expression "there's no place like home" comes to us from the song Home Sweet Home from the 1823 operetta Clary, the Maid of Milan, with lyrics by John Howard Payne and music by Sir Henry Bishop. That heartwarming ballad became one of the most popular songs of the entire 19th century.
It is so humble, there's no place like home.
This episode takes place in the year 57 BC. This is about 30 years before the start of the Roman Empire, a time when Rome ruled most of Europe, plus parts of northern Africa and western Asia. During the time period of this episode, Rome was still a republic and controlled the Mediterranean, but was hampered by various internal conflicts and civil wars. When Octavian became sole ruler in 27 BC, that's when the empire began and Rome's influence spread well beyond the Mediterranean. The Roman Empire lasted about 500 years after that. What we're actually seeing is not the Roman Empire as we know it. This is the build-up to the Roman Empire, and it seems like they are actively conquering other lands.
I'm pretty sure that Claudia and her father Gallus are supposed to be Gauls specifically.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. General Julius Maximus seems to be the episode's stand-in for Julius Caesar. At the time of this story, Caesar was busy conquering various territories and making a name for himself as a great military hero. He also formed a powerful political alliance at this time called the First Triumvirate.
Hello.
Was Crassus in the second one, or am I thinking of somebody else?
Neil Young was in it for a while. Stephen Stills. I think they were all in it at some point.
Yeah, but in my opinion, it didn't really take off until Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham joined.
The Roman soldiers are shown to tower over Ralph and Richie. In reality, Ron Howard and Don Most would have been of above average height in ancient Rome.
They looked at me and said, "Hey, mister, are you tall?"
And I'm not sure where King Gallus and Princess Claudia are supposed to be from. Cupcake just says it's a walled city.
We've landed in a walled city.
As we discussed, it could be Gaul. That was a place conquered by Julius Caesar.
Don't you threaten me, son. You got a lot of gall.
Maximus's name is spelled Maximvs on the banner. This is accurate to the time period. Ancient Roman writing had no written letter U, so V was substituted. Is that why we also call the letter W when it should be double V?
Maybe.
That just occurred to me. Cupcake literally rolls out the red carpet for her enemies.
Very decorative, Cuppers. The only thing missing is the red carpet.
We may associate this tradition with modern-day movie premieres and award ceremonies, but it can be traced back in history as far as ancient Greece. This practice was popularized in America by the New York Central Railroad in the early 1900s and was adapted by Hollywood in the 1920s. Fonzie says, friends, Romans, countrymen.
Lend me your ears.
This is taken from William Shakespeare's 1599 tragedy Julius Caesar and is spoken by Mark Antony in the wake of Caesar's death. I thought that was from history and not just from the play, but it's just from the play.
Shakespeare was pretty good at coming up with stuff that sounded good.
When Maximus attacks the walled city, Ralph quips that King Kong is in the neighborhood.
Maximus and his army have returned.
Either that or King Kong's in the neighborhood.
If you've seen the 1933 film of King Kong, you'll remember that the residents of Skull Island have built a wall between them and the giant gorilla, which is an engineering feat in and of itself.
Wow! Look at the size of that platform!
The battering ram with the actual ram's head is a pretty accurate depiction of a real weapon that Roman armies would have used when attacking walled cities.
My first instinct is to say, oh, that's kind of a cute thing, but I guess it makes sense. Rams are very good at ramming things, so it kind of makes sense to copy them as closely as possible for that.
Guts, glory, ram.
Our heroes find themselves in the catacombs. These underground galleries were used by early Christians in the Roman Empire as burial grounds.
Most people prefer to steer clear of burial grounds.
They were also a safe place to practice their religion during times of persecution. Have you ever gotten to tour any catacombs anywhere?
I have not, no.
Would you want to?
Maybe, yeah. I don't think I'm claustrophobic. It might be fun.
Ralph's subplot with the lion is highly reminiscent of the fable Androcles and the Lion, which dates back to the 2nd century. The story centers around a runaway Roman slave.
There lived a poor slave named Androcles.
My friends call me Andy.
However, he was seldom called Andy because
I don't have any friends.
Who tends to a wounded lion. When the slave is later condemned to death by the emperor, he is supposed to be devoured by the lions in the Circus Maximus, but he fortunately meets the same lion that he once befriended.
Leo, wait, it's me, Andy. Do you remember me?
Yeah, you took the thorn out of my paw.
Right.
We are still familiar with the tale of Androcles and the lion, and its unrealistic depiction of how good animals are at identifying humans.
In some versions of Androcles and the Lion, the evil emperor is Caligula.
If only all Rome had just one neck.
Oh, wow.
When the army passes by, you'll see that one soldier is carrying a statue of a golden eagle on a long pole with a banner underneath. The eagle was the most prominent symbol of the Roman Empire and was carried by the official eagle bearer in each legion. The eagle had an almost religious significance to the ancient Romans, and this symbol was protected at all cost. Did you know about the eagle bearers?
Vaguely, yes, because of the book, The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary Sutcliffe.
The banner says SPQR. That stands for Senatus Populus K Romanus, referring to the Senate and people of Rome. Being fed to lions, or condemnation to beasts, was a fairly common form of capital punishment in ancient Rome and would have been used during the time of this story. It also served as entertainment for the lower classes. However, the famous Roman Colosseum depicted in this episode did not exist yet in 57 BC. The largest ancient amphitheater in the world was not built until 72 AD under Emperor Vespasian. Julius Caesar was long dead by then.
So even if they had gone with 57 AD instead of 57 BC, it would have been anachronistic. I'm pretty sure they only chose the year 57 so that they could make the 1957 joke.
It also reminds me of a song that they did on Mr. Science Theater 3000, where Tom Servo says he's going to sing a song about the 50s, and he means the years 50 AD to 59 AD.
Do you remember the 50s when Emperor Claudius died? The Apostle Paul traveled to Greece.
Servo. And then back in the funky 70s about Pompeii.
Back in the super bad 70s, the Roman Empire still reigned supreme. Emperor Titus came to power they finished up the Colosseum.
Servo. Fonzie and Mr. Cool traveled to Rome in a chariot. These horse-drawn vehicles were used in ancient Rome, but mainly for racing and for grand processions, and you'd need a minimum of 2 horses to pull them. Ralph uses his Captain Daylight combination secret passage opener and flashlight. This is a reference to Captain Midnight, an action-adventure show that ran on radio from 1938 to 1949 and on TV from 1954 to 1958. I'm guessing Ralph was a fan of the TV version.
This is Captain Midnight. I'll be on the ground in just 30 seconds with this week's exciting adventure.
Which was later rebranded as Jet Jackson Flying Commando. The show was known for its use of technology and was intended to inspire young people to become interested in science and industry. Since this is an episode about ancient Rome, we get a shot of the famous Roman aqueducts, bridge-like structures that were used to transport fresh water to highly populated areas. The Romans constructed these throughout the Republic and later throughout the entire Roman Empire.
What have the Romans ever done for us? The aqueduct? What? The aqueduct?
And I believe there are still some aqueducts standing today.
I assume that much like catacombs, they're mostly just there for tourists now.
Other observations this week. For some reason, this episode had no title card. That made me sad.
It's a bummer.
The actor playing General Maximus made some bold choices, namely giving the character a deep, gravelly voice and having the character shout all his lines.
We will be married as soon as we reach Rome, and your father's kingdom will be as good as mine.
What did you think of the portrayal of General Maximus?
I admit that I'm not an expert on Julius Caesar, but he can be theatrical, but he can also be crafty and clever, and this guy just yells all the time. It works for a Saturday morning cartoon, but maybe it's not the most nuanced portrayal of Julius Caesar. Not that Julius Caesar was a great guy, but you know.
I just thought it must have been hell on the actor's vocal cords because he's shouting all his lines.
On the subject of voices, the guy voicing the biggest soldier henchman,
King Gallus and his people are defending the walls of their city.
Sounds so much like Candy Candido.
No name. Just call me Uncle.
I don't know if it's him, but it sounds so much like him.
If you really pay attention, Peter, to this entire series, you might notice that Cupcake's pigtails cause many problems for the animators. Her pigtails will often pass through solid matter like door frames, and the animators really don't know how to handle it when Cupcake raises her arms. Should her arms be in front of the pigtails or behind them? They don't know, so it will change from shot to shot.
It reminds me of how on episodes of Gargoyles, you can usually tell which studio is doing the animating based on how they handle the wings. If the Gargoyles have their wings wrapped around them like a cape, or if they sprung from the really good animation studio, then the wings are just going to be out the whole time.
I always think that character designers should consult with animators when they're creating characters, because if we give a character these physical features, are you going to be able to animate that? But sometimes you don't know what problems you're going to run into until you start using the characters. And I'm thinking of an early episode of The Simpsons when there was a scene that required Bart Simpson to stand on his head. And then the animators realized that Bart's arms are the exact length of his head. So he couldn't do like a convincing handstand.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Because his head is gigantic.
With a snow white pillow for my big fat head.
What is it with the barefoot women on this show? When we first see Princess Claudia, she's running around with no sandals on. We saw other shoeless young women in the King Arthur and Ancient Greece episodes. Why do they think that women in the past went around with no shoes, Peter?
I don't know. We see in this episode that all the men have shoes. Claudia's dad is the king. Surely he could spring for some shoes for his daughter.
You would think so.
And don't call me Shirley.
Okay, you can figure this out for me, Peter. General Maximus falls into the water and gets all wet at the end of the story, but how does that solve any of our heroes' problems? Maximus still commands an entire army. It feels like the story just kind of ends without reaching a conclusion. How was this their victory over General Maximus? He's wet, that's it?
I'm in pain, and I'm wet. And I'm still hysterical!
I guess they can bring Claudia back to her father's kingdom, wherever it is. Maximus is still a very high-ranking general. He's still a big deal in Rome. On the other hand, maybe the fact that he's probably not going to get to marry Claudia means he hasn't succeeded in conquering her father's kingdom. That is going to destroy his career or something.
My empire is crumbling!
What I think happened is that they got to the end of the episode and realized, oh, we're out of time. Let's just wrap this up.
That is almost definitely what happened, yeah.
Now, Cupcake goes light on her catchphrases this week. She does say a few.
Leaping leptons, marvelous meteors, temporal transistors, shooting stars twice, moon craters, suffering Saturn, cosmic comets, and leaping liftoff.
Were there some times when Mr. Cool makes things better? Sort of. He volunteers to lead the way out of the catacombs, and he even wears a miner's helmet with a light in front. I thought that was pretty good. But there was a time when he made things worse. He fetches a map for Fonzie, but then immediately breaks it into pieces, making it unreadable.
And of course, the entire episode happened because he sent Richie and Ralph out into the time stream.
Mr. Cool, no! That's the ejection ray lever! Whoa!
Here were the times when Mr. Cool suffers physically and mentally. He slams into the central console on the time machine and is briefly eaten by it. It spits him out a few seconds later. A giant stone cube falls on him. He gets rolled up in the red carpet and he panics quite a bit, but it doesn't seem to hurt him any. And then he runs into Fonzie's leg and his nose gets crumpled up. Again, he gets off pretty light considering the problems that he's causing. Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in There's No Place Like Rome?
We've already talked about Claudia's lack of shoes, but I want to draw attention to her flower crown. It's very 2010s Tumblr of her. I like it a lot. Very aesthetic.
One of the reasons why you would want to do a Roman episode is to depict the robes. You would want to have all those costumes.
We don't really get a lot of those in this episode because once we get to Rome, it's basically a ghost town. We really only get to see Maximus and his soldiers.
The soldier uniforms were pretty accurate, I thought, too, though. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yeah, this is a pretty fun one. It's not really a cut above the others, but it's not noticeably bad or anything. General Maximus makes for a very fun villain. I love the Candy Candido henchman. And I thought it was pretty fun how they set up the whole Androcles and the Lion thing with Ralph, only to subvert it. I did feel kind of bad that Ralph doesn't really get to contribute to this episode. Fonzie is pretty consistently the main hero, and he's usually the one who saves the day, which means that the other characters don't really get a ton to do.
He does get some fun moments where he's interacting with the lion. That was kind of fun for me to see.
And it is fun that Ralph is a coward, but also if he thinks that he is in control of a situation, he will be overly confident about it.
I think that led to some of the more entertaining moments in the episode. Overall, if I was disappointed in this one, it was that it leans so heavily on the tropes and formulas of the Fonz and the Happy Days gang, when we've seen that they can do episodes that break those traditions a little bit and use the characters in a different way. Like we just saw last week, where Cupcake is more competent, or Cupcake is given a love interest. Well, now Cupcake is back to being jealous of the women paying attention to Fonzie, and there's a damsel in distress running around barefoot with soldiers chasing after her, which is a thing we've seen in many, many episodes of the show so far. So this episode was a little too on the nose, a little too much like the other ones, when I think it's more fun when they mess with the formula a little bit. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow me on Blue Sky at peterwolfrank.bsky.social. They can also follow me on Mastodon at peterwolfrank@mastodon.social.
They can follow me on Blue Sky at joeblevins.bsky.social. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com, and they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket next time we talk?
Next time, the Fonz and the Happy Days gang pays tribute to an old silent film serial in Perilous Pauline.
That sounds kind of fun, doesn't it? So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
When in Rome, you do like the Romans do. You play like the Romans play together. You're all invited, so right this way you're gonna beat the Roman holidays.
You'll love Gus and Maury, Ricosia too.
And Big Brother Half Holiday.
And Brutus the Lion, the family pack.
He'll eat you out of house and home as quick as that.
When in Rome, we'll visit the holidays. They make everybody welcome. Hop in your chariot, come this way. Bye-bye.